like I was telling my co-founder this, I'm like, look, we are not ever hiring a head of HR. I am the head of HR.
Yeah, correct. I believe
Right?
this.
I'm okay hiring a VP of HR to report to me if we end up being lucky enough to scale. But I'm the CHRO. The CEO is the CHRO because in a product company where everything is made by people, HR policy is your single biggest lever.
Cool. Welcome, Sidu. I'm so happy that we got you finally.
Thank you for having me.
It's been we last spoke on Twitter a few months back, and since then I was like, if I do this, at that point I hadn't started Founder Minus One, so like if I ever do like this podcast, I need to get you on this podcast. So it's been like a 3-month, 4-month dream till now. But nice of you to join us. Just quick intro about the podcast itself. It's largely something I wanted to do where I thought a lot of the podcasts that are available largely have founders. And I was like, I think it'll be very useful for people to sort of also listen to thoughts of people who are founder minus one, where a lot of the operations execution actually happens there. And that's where the real sort of tactical advice usually sits. That's the whole point of doing this. With you, funnily enough, I think I found your thread that you did on Twitter a couple of months ago, if I'm right. And I found a lot of things that, people always, especially people who are at Founder Minus One, think about. But I don't know if they say it out loud. But those are some of the things that I want to sort of double click on.
For sure.
But that's pretty much the plan for the next hour or so.
Sounds good.
Cool. Just quick intro about you so that everybody has context of what you're up to right now. So you did your engineering in Bangalore, if I'm right.
That's right.
And then I saw ThoughtWorks. Then I saw C42, which is the company you started. And then there is Gojek. And funnily enough, there's like a peppering of startups and products and things that you've done in between. So it's quite curious as to sort of go through that quickly with you. So I'm assuming, was engineering a choice, like a conscious choice?
Yes, very much. I mean, it was an act of rebellion. My father wanted me to do management. He wanted me to do an MBA.
Got it. And it was computer science for you?
No, actually, I lost the battle with my father, and he said, "Look, you do industrial engineering and management because it has engineering and management."
Oh wow, I didn't know this.
But about a year in, my mom was like, "Look, this boy is going to tank this entire course. You move him to something he likes." My father gave in. Basically, my academic performance was bad enough in the first year that I got what I wanted, which is an interesting way of doing it, right? So second year, I moved to computer science in a different college, and then I did computer science.
Got it. And so when you completed your engineering, again, was there conscious thought as to what do you want to do next?
Very much. I mean, I think it was pretty clear from middle school itself that I wanted to code and start up.
Okay. How did that sort of come about though?
No idea. It was just there. I mean, I'd been messing around with computers since I was a kid, basically serendipity, right? A van friend of mine who later on became a very good friend, but at that time was a van friend. His parents decided to buy a PC XT in like 1990. They're not like rich. And in those days, a PC XT cost 50,000 rupees. So, I got exposed to a computer. Usual drill, right? Start playing games, start writing code to make games. And then it goes on from there. So I had pretty good clarity that I wanted to code and I wanted to start a company.
Was it start a company or was it I want to make things? Because those two are
the distinction between that only crept in as I understood the game. Not even started, like years in, 7-8 years in. At the time, for me, it was the same thing.
Got it. So did you, what was the thing that you started right out of college?
I started working out of college, and my school program, again, childhood friend, he's now the founder and CEO of Blog Vault.
Okay.
He started a company called Active.
Okay.
And I joined that company as co-founder.
Oh, nice.
And all of this was moonlighting. I mean, both of us had regular jobs. I was at
Yeah,
ThoughtWorks. He was at Netscaler. So yeah, that was the first active money was the first product we shipped. It was a great experience in how everyone says they want to manage their money, but actually no one wants to. One of those things where customer feedback is going to mislead you. Uh, so after a few months of working on active money, all of this is pre-internet, pre-smartphone, so it was on SMS.
Got it.
Like Akshat was very clear that he wanted to build mobile apps. He
Okay.
had that clarity where I didn't. And I was like, okay, you know best. But in those days, mobile apps meant SMS.
Got
So
it.
we did a money management system, and then we moved to group SMS, and that's how we discovered Twitter, because we were looking for competitors.
Nice.
So
In
yeah,
an alt universe, Twitter would have been a Bangalore startup. That would have been.
I mean no, because we couldn't raise money for no matter how hard we tried. We almost closed a seed, and then that fell through. Actually, the smart thing to do would have been if we had packed our bags and moved to the valley.
Yeah.
So in an alternate universe, Twitter was started by a couple of brown dudes, but still
But
the
in
valley.
SM.
Not in Bangalore. Not at that time.
That's actually true. I don't think we had the ecosystem. When was this? This was
2006. And I laugh about it because if I had the kind of numbers we had then, I would be doing like a 50 mil round now. because we reached 6,000 DAU in Bangalore city alone in 2 months, sustained.
Yeah, quite insane. But I just want to touch like 5 minutes on ThoughtWorks. Again, was it a conscious choice that I want to work
No.
at ThoughtWorks?
No. I basically didn't have the academics to qualify for Infi on campus.
Oh wow! So
Infi
Infi was higher on the status.
No, ThoughtWorks wasn't even there. I had moved to a no-name, no-brand college for computer science. So there were no placements.
Okay.
The only placements were your volume IT services recruiting. I didn't even qualify for Infi. And I did actually convert a services job at a company called Indus Consulting. It's an American consulting company. They had an Indian division called Merindus.
Okay.
So I got placed there in 7th sem. But by 8th sem, they had shut down. So you could say, I had the pleasure of getting laid off before I even joined the job. And at the time, all of my buddies were sitting. So PESIT had this really good program called the pre-placement program. I think it was called PPP, something like that. But basically, it was taught by this, I forget who, it was some super awesome dev from Yahoo.
Oh, this was like a course which was specifically...
It was specifically for programmers in PESIT outside of the curriculum run by Yahoo.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I was really hardcore, and I had a few friends there. They talked a lot about all of their off-campus applications, because this was an off-campus channel. You basically took this course and then you applied off-campus to all the big companies. And they basically, ThoughtWorks kept coming up again and again and again. Like Akshat applied to ThoughtWorks, he got in. I had other friends who were in this PESIT placement program. They applied to ThoughtWorks. All of them spoke highly of the interview process. And at that time, ThoughtWorks was the only company that I was aware of in all of my search, which didn't care about my marks.
Yeah.
And was happy to interview me off campus and involved a coding round.
Oh wow.
Right, which is exactly like my engineering, right? Like all the theory exams I've like borderline passed by, all the labs I've like aced, right? Like you can see that like all my theory exams are like 45, 48, 49, even though I've written every program correctly. And my labs are all like 95, 98, 99, 98, 99. So the same thing happened because I've actually got to write code. And the folks doing the interview had poor judgment. I got placed there. So it was an off-campus placement just by chance because my friends were interviewing there.
Wow. Would you say that was a good start?
Oh, hell yes.
I always hear this from people who work at ThoughtWorks that, it's one of the best places to start as a software developer. Why do they like, is there something that like culturally happened at ThoughtWorks which led them to start with like some sort of tidbits about ThoughtWorks which sort of highlights what it is to sort of work at ThoughtWorks, and then like why did that happen? Why did they become like the kind of company that they did?
Look, I should caveat that my experiences were 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know how things are now, but
I still hear good things about ThoughtWorks.
the
Even
culture
from,
carries on. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm just caveating because caveating has to be done. Look, it's both very simple yet very hard. The people, so ThoughtWorks primarily benefited from the dot-com crash.
Mhm.
Because in the dot-com crash, a whole bunch of kick-ass people got churned out of the industry from mainstream jobs and moved into consulting companies.
Hmm.
The second thing is that ThoughtWorks happened to connect with the crowd of people who were migrating from Smalltalk to Java in the 90s.
Oh,
And Smalltalk had a lot of really, really, really good things in it, which were maybe decades ahead of its time. Right? And that never came to full fruition because of a host of other factors. But fundamentally, Smalltalk was a very, very interesting stack. And all of these people went to Java and they were like trying to recreate a lot of those patterns there.
hmm.
The third thing is that the same crowd also intersected with the original, Agile Manifesto crowd. Like if you go open the Agile Manifesto and look at all the signatories, and then you Google, you will find like fully a quarter of them have something to do with ThoughtWorks. And Martin, of course, Martin Fowler I joined ThoughtWorks in 99 or 2000. So there was this interesting combination of really smart people churning out of like startup tech, mainstream industry tech in the dot-com crash because everything contracted, combined with a bunch of people who had been thinking about how to build software.
Hmm. The
Now,
agile crowd.
The agile crowd. Now, you want to ask me what's different? Literally, like zero companies I have worked with have a thought process on how to build software. It's
Nobody
just like,
sits,
oh, come, let's do something.
yeah. Nobody sits and
Something we'll do.
thinks about like,
Yeah.
how do we do it?
Yeah. Or why do we do it? Or what is the trade-off? Why is this? And it's not like it's some rocket science or something, right? I keep saying this, like all of this stuff is like done to death in 5 textbooks, hundreds of blog posts. Go to Sidu Wiki, there are conversations for years and years from people on why this, why not this, how this, why. But I think the key difference between ThoughtWorks and anything else that is out there at that time is that ThoughtWorks was like, bluntly, I would say they had a theory of management. All of this stuff sounds like, oh, we're talking about something high fund. I'm like, look, most companies in tech do not have a theory of management.
They had one. Like that's
ThoughtWorks had one. Good, bad, indifferent. It had its problems. It had its strength, had its weaknesses. All of that is there. I'm not debating those. They had one.
Yeah.
Right now, I can shut down like 99% of conversations I have with people in tech on this topic and shut down. I can just be like, pick 5 things you do in your typical week, then explain to me what you've considered and discarded in favor of this. Yeah. Like, okay, I considered ABC, I'm doing A, but we discarded BC because of nobody can give me BC, let alone why they discarded it.
Yeah. Actually, that is true. Like at a very high level, that's what a management process is. Like you've considered like 10 things and you've chosen to do 5.
I mean, it's exactly why you and I ended up having the debate we did over Twitter DM, right? Because I'm like, look, the mainstream concept of what a product manager does makes no sense to me. Right? It's just like this random black space, quicksand mess of everyone else's fuck ups.
No, I fully agree that it's a job that has arisen out of most likely incompetencies of other functions.
Everyone else, right? And you just hire this person, throw them into that quicksand and say, boss, turn this into a road for me to, send trucks over. It's idiotic. I mean, you need to have some theory of management that says how do people work with each other, right? It's not that, hey, I have no theory of management, it's chaos. Now I can't get anything done in this chaos. So now what do? Let me hire a product manager. Right? Okay. I mean, ThoughtWorks didn't have product managers either, but that was for a different, there's a different reason for that.
That is something I remember, even though I was like, I think 18 or 19 when I went there. I remember that when I asked whoever was the coach, I saw Scrum boards everywhere. There were like literally these whiteboards with like no post-its across the floor. And I said, I asked him about chai, like, how does it work? Like, how do you guys go about doing it? And he said, look, we have clients who come with problems and the team gets together. And even the teams apparently were like, put together based on what is it that the client wants. And then in a few weeks or whatever, we deliver and then they give feedback and it goes on and on. And there was no mention of there was a project manager. I remember very clearly that they said we have a project manager, but there was no this person called product manager in that entire setup.
Correct. I would, just to be clear, I would not make that as an argument. I want to be clear that I'm not making that as the basis of an argument for should not be a product manager.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because one of the gaps, so let's talk about the downsides of that, right? Of that experience. The downside of that experience is when you have little or no control over the direction of the business, you over-index on what you control, which is how the software is built. So the absence of a product manager was as much a reflection of the lack of control you have as a consultant over the direction of the product.
Correct.
As it is anything else, right? But having said that, the level of consistency that happened in how you work over there, I did not realize until I got out that it does not exist anywhere else. Because you had a fixed routine. You came in the morning, you picked up you did your stand-up, and it went that way, right? Like it ran like a shop floor. There isn't process. The process is followed. It's not like you're doing whatever you want, right? There's a user story. You do stand up. If you still you're working on something from yesterday, you carry on with it. If you're finished with stuff from yesterday, you pick up a new one. Then you pick a pair. You rotate pairs every day. Like these are things which honestly, most companies that I engage with can't dream of executing operationally. Can't. On management level itself, that will break because the management muscle to execute that is not there. ThoughtWorks, it was already well entrenched. It was cultural at that point.
Why?
Right? So every project, because practice, many years of practice. So I didn't even realize there must have been a time when this was started.
Not there, yeah.
Yeah, it was not there. I didn't, as a junior, I got into it. I thought, okay, everywhere it'll be like this only, right?
Yeah.
But it's not. Right? Like so much effort was put into making sure that the size of a user story averages 2 to 3 days. I have never seen that done anywhere else. And the number for me in my perf review system for product management, when I train, deploy, set goals, and perf review PMs, controlling the batch size of work that goes into execution is a core performance metric of a PM. Right? You need to be able to give me a P50, P90 on batch size of work going in for execution. That is 2 days at P50. P90 is under the iteration boundary. This is a performance review criteria for me. I have not heard this said in the industry ever, anywhere. I'm like, boss, if you're not controlling batch size, you're playing gilli danda or what over here. Now, how do you control anything if you don't control batch size?
Which is why predictability goes for a complete toss.
Goes for a toss. Then everyone is cribbing saying that no, estimates are not met, everything is delayed. I'm like, boss, it all starts with batch size. No, yes, there are other factors, but batch size is at the core. Now you're telling me you do not want to deploy people to own batch size because it's a full-time job.
Yeah.
Right? It's for me today, it is a capability that is a feeder into a PM capability, right? For me, when I'm training APMs, I will put them for 6 months on owning requirements and requirement size. Right? Get used to cutting and recutting requirements to fit that batch size is enormous effort.
Correct, because that's where your scope cutting skills come to the fore.
Skills come in, your ability to talk to stakeholders, talk to the executors, whether they're designers or engineers, say, okay, do I leave this in the story? Do I move this out of the story? How do I get the story down? While making sure it doesn't turn into a bunch of tasks. It's something we can deploy to the customer, right? That is a full-time job. It takes a lot of mental horsepower to pull that off, plus soft skills and stuff. And it's just absent in the industry today.
I think, was there any other company where you think you would have ended up in that point, which would have gotten you all the things that you got out of ThoughtWorks?
In India, no.
No, right? Definitely. There was nothing at that point.
Zero. It was just a random chance that ThoughtWorks had an India office at that time.
Yeah. Was it the same Kormangla office or was there a separate
office? No, it was in Diamond District.
Oh, nice.
So the Gojek office got set up like where the ThoughtWorks office was.
Nice. Very interesting. So from ThoughtWorks, then you did C42.
Then I did C42. But C42 itself, that itself is a LinkedIn sort of narrative that I've got there to make it look coherent. But the reality was it was like 5 years of random work. Actually, within that one legal entity, there were 4 or 5 businesses, 2 attempts at services, right? First attempt to mill ARR, second attempt to 2.5 mil ARR. Ruby Monk happened in between, which was
Yeah.
commercially non-successful, but I mean, to this day, it like 80% of new Rubies are
I
using
remember using
every year.
Ruby Monk.
Yeah. So they were like that 5-year period from 2010 to 2015 under the label C42 was actually a lot of stuff.
But what was the thought process behind? Was it like, hey, look, I have worked at ThoughtWorks now for 4-5 years. I know how this model works. Was the thought process to go and replicate
No. Oh God, no. Like we were too naive for that, right? It was like, look, we are doing services. Services is not cool. Real people build products. It means I have to be building products. But I had just come off the ActiveMobs experience.
Okay.
And I was like, boss, never again am I depending on investors to do anything.
Hmm.
I need to be able to fund stuff myself to a reasonable degree. So let's do services on the side. So a bunch of engineers with no sales, no marketing, no cash flow model, no nothing. Like we figured out something called cash flow matters by not meeting payroll. Okay, and then skipping salary among the founders for 4 months so that everyone else gets payroll, because we hadn't even built a cash flow model, let alone no segment, no channel, no nothing. It was like, look, go out. Like the first project we took to bring in revenue, we did $2 an hour, which we realized after the fact. Because we took a fixed price project and then the actual effort turned out to be so much that we finally ended up making $2 an hour. So it was just abject stupidity and inexperience and passion, which is a
potent combination of things to have.
Potent combination. So
the LIIT of our universe.
It was just that. It was like, okay, we're doing services because we have to fund product, but that's the real sexy thing.
But were there parts of ThoughtWorks that you took to C42?
By default. Again, all of this realization
this is what I know.
Emerged as we were working. This is how we work, this is how we work. How else is there to work?
I have a very interesting connect to C42. So when I used to work at Dunzo, there was a map of Indranagar on our roof.
Right.
Right. And one of the buildings I remember in that map was C42.
Right.
Because it used to be very close to where I used to sit. Whenever I look up, there was C42 on my head. It was very close to CMH Road, I think. When you guys saw it.
It's actually on the road where I grew up.
Oh, nice. But how did C42 then, of course, like you guys then went to Gojek. How did that happen? Like, I've never heard the story behind how that actually happened.
Sure. So by 2013, it was very clear that our dreams were dust. Okay, we built a very successful product, which was financially totally unviable. We didn't want to do services because it was not sexy. So we took a year. We basically shut down, spun off the services business. We split the company up. Everyone that wanted to do services took all the contracts and that became Nilenso.
Oh, nice. I remember that.
So the company dropped down to like just 3 people. We had 10 lakhs in the bank saved up. That was our operating budget for the year. And we went off to do a product. We chose the matrimony space. We got like very little traction because, I mean, I've seen traction, like ActiveMobs had traction, Ruby Monk had traction. We didn't get traction. We got something, but not worth. And we had set a 1-year deadline. So 31st March, we shut that down and we said, look, also now the founders are old enough, married. One of us was expecting a baby. This business of like not knowing how much money is coming, all that is not going to work. Let's just accept that we know we have made money doing services. Let's do services again, but let's do it right.
Yeah.
So, we did this time around channel segments, business model, canvas, cash flow planning, strategy, vision. We're going to be the McKinsey of tech in 10 years, right? This is 2014's vision statement. And we figured out that for the kind of work we didn't want to do cost optimization. We were not a money saving solution, right? We were a top line. You outsource to us for top line, not for bottom line. Now, any such business has 3 pegs: good people, good work, good money. Dilute any one and the other 2 dilute. Right? If you don't have good work, good people won't stay.
Yeah.
If you don't have good people, you can't do good work. If you don't have good money, you can't keep good people. All that. There's basically a feedback loop between the three pegs. In 2014, nobody, like all the good work in the region was either like a certain kind of enterprise project, which would require you to sell in the US. You couldn't sell it here. Or it was startups.
Yeah.
And it's easy to forget in 2022 that in 2014, startups did not outsource.
Yeah.
If they outsourced stuff, they would not get funded.
Correct.
It's not like today where you raise money and then your investors tell you go outsource.
It was like a red flag. Like,
it was a huge red flag. So that meant that if we wanted, now we obviously can't do enterprise sales in the US, which meant we had to crack VC, which meant that we were distributing through VC. We can't go direct to the startups because that will stall. So that was the first time that I also committed to doing sales full time, by the way. It was grueling because it meant doing nothing while you desperately wait for a callback. But we were very clear that, weirdly, it's the first time I actually worked on strategy, and it also paid off on the first attempt, which is why I have a certain conviction in that. We had mapped out that from a financial sort of projection perspective, we're going to have similar exposure to outcomes as our investors would, because we're working with their portfolio, right? Now, as a services company, what I'm basically saying is 90% of my clientele will just disappear without a trace. Most likely will not pay 1 or 2 months of invoice. Right, so I have to model my cash flow to ensure that, assume, most of my clients are going to suddenly drop off, not pay last couple of months of invoice. 10% will do okay, 1% will turn into rocket ship. We also knew that because, EMC had acquired Pivotal Labs, Fab.com had done Two Sparrow. We knew that a highly leveraged vendor building for a growing business is likely to field an acquisition.
So this is all, like, at what point into this did you think of all of this?
Month 2, before we started, our planning stage. This was literally on the whiteboard. Right?
Nice.
What we didn't understand is when we were mapping these probabilities, we said the probabilities are the same as the investors, which is like less than 1% chance of a crazy rocket ship with an exit, 10% chance of a mid-level outcome, maybe acquisition, maybe not, maybe attractive, maybe not. 90% will do 6 months, 1 year of work and likely just go belly up. What we didn't understand is the investors are going to put us on their most important problems.
Which makes sense.
So we actually got nearly 100% exposure to the 1%.
Yeah. Because why would they?
So in those days, we basically ended up, exactly. Like, why are they going to put you on the 90%? Yeah. They are going to look at this and say, what are my rocket ships? Let's buy insurance on the rocket ship. Because again, all of this was post facto. Going in, we're like, what we did, we'll do, right? Like, we'll build systems for people, right? Like, they want this product developed, we build it for them. What actually ended up happening was that we got deployed in places where the systems weren't scaling. So it's all our engagements started as firefighting engagements and converted to delivery engagements. It didn't start as a delivery engagement. It's always like, oh my God, things are hitting, everything's melting. We need help. You guys take care of it. Then it moves into delivery, right?
Interesting. So you always it meant that you always worked on something that was already working and it was sort of
rocket ship. We got sucked into rocket ships again and again. And the second thing that was game changing for us is in 2013, when we started down this path, Ajay was running Code Ignition in Delhi. Right? And Niranjan, Akash and I were running C42 in Bangalore. And we were doing a lot of cross-selling. And effectively, we were on each other's boards. I mean, not legally, but it's a small company. So every important decision, it would be like, hey, Ajay, we're thinking of doing this. What's up? Ajay is doing something like, hey, guys, I'm thinking of doing this. What's up? Give each other gali, I told you not to do that. Now you're doing the same stupidity you told me not to do. All that's been going on for a long time because, old friends. But what happened is we started cross-selling a lot more because they were doing DevOps infra work. Anytime their clients wanted to move further up the stack, it would come to us.
Got it.
We were doing back-end web work. The moment we needed to go lower down, we would call them in, right? And we also, like, for design, we used to do, so these collaborations existed informally. So design, we would do a lot of work with what was uncommon at that time, now obvious.
Yeah.
I mean, with Rahul, basically.
Yeah.
Mobile and stuff, Sudhanshu and Abhinit in Pune, Left Shift. Right? So interestingly, Left Shift, C14 and Code Ignition were already sort of occasionally collaborating on client projects. And Ajay and us, we decided to merge. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Because obviously, like, back-end DevOps is a perfect match. Then over time, we'll add web, mobile, all of this jazz, will become like a full stack company. That was the thought process. So Codeignation started migrating to Bangalore one by one. People moved to Bangalore. All this is going on. So Ajay, Niranjan, Akash, and I were working on this as Code Monk. That's not a name you'll see in the public domain because we didn't actually execute the legal merger, but we were selling to VCs as Code Monk, and that's how we got into Sequoia, and that got us into a bunch of Sequoia rocket ships. So we did work for Byju's at that time. We did work for Gojek, Tokopedia, almost engaged with what is now Mid-Trans at that time. And what we thought would potentially happen is a 1% probability at some point in a 10-year journey happened in the first 6 months of actually starting to engage.
But it seems like a conscious thought. It was at least like a semi-conscious sort of.
No, it wasn't even semi. We had a full plan ready to go because we had learned by then. We studied Taleb, right? It's like the positive black swans that may occur, even if they're low probability, if they're life-changing, you have a full-blown plan. Right? So we had a maturity model where we were looking at this saying, is the founder trying to poach our people? Yeah, maturity model leveled up. Is the founder trying to hire away one of the founders? Okay, next level of maturity. Is the founder saying, come, let's sit at the table and talk about an acquisition? Okay, final level of maturity. We had this thought process crystal clear. It's just that we didn't expect the probabilities to swing so much in our favor because we hadn't anticipated this dynamic that we would get put on all the rocket ships.
Very interesting. Before we end this, why do you think this model doesn't exist today? Like, or does it?
I mean, it will soon. What do you think I'm working on? Because look, think about it. So post that, right? Gojek's core was built out like this. It was all M&A.
Yeah. I remember. There was a period where everybody who was like in Bangalore and was working in tech was like being pulled into Gojek.
Now, what we realized through this is actually a very, very nice way to create a privileged marketplace for high-skilled talent and matchmaking with companies that appreciate the skill. Because what happens when you go through this it's not even an acqui-hire, right? It's basically an extended interview.
Yeah.
It's a 6-month interview, right?
And of not just one person, but an entire sort of...
The team, which is what matters. You get to test a team in production.
Yeah.
Now, it turns out that for a buyer, buying an entire team which is proven in production is totally worth paying a premium for.
Especially if it's in your system. They've touched your systems.
They've been there, they're building stuff. All you do is you change their title and nothing else changes. No hiring, no onboarding, no figuring out how to get 20 people, gel them in a team. Are they getting along? What's the org structure? None of that stuff. Right? So that's one of the aspects of what we are working on now, which we believe is there is a walled garden marketplace, with restricted access to high skill people, proven high skill with portfolio. You exit into the market never again through a job. You build a team, you contract, you see whom you like because it's a bi-directional interview. Right? If you really like someone and they're doing well, they buy you out. Everyone on the team gets a hiring bonus that is unprecedented. You get comp that's unprecedented, and you definitely get equity which you can't dream of on the open market.
Right. Yeah. This should sort of exist. Like
it should. It totally should.
Awesome. Cool. I know that after this, you spent a bunch of time at Gojek. I actually don't want to touch a lot about the Gojek work because there's a lot of content that you've done on that. But instead, I now want to sort of double click on a bunch of stuff that you've said. I want to see
my one, badly misjudged engagement farming thread.
No, I think it was. I didn't see anything that people had not been thinking about, like at least in close circles. It was just good to see it out there.
Sure.
Which is also why I think it got the kind of engagement that it did. Somebody finally said it out loud.
Right.
But cool. So I want to start with since we were talking a bunch about execution.
Yeah.
You spoke about estimation, right? Like you said, we're extremely bad at estimation, and we routinely overcome it and underdeliver. You said this can't be fixed, only worked around. Can you just double click on estimation itself as a process, do you think it's useful?
Look, if it is rigorously run, it's absolutely useful. The problem is it's never rigorously run,
Hmm.
right? There is a certain set of, you can pick your specific process, but there are 2 or 3 things that have to be there, right? One, you have to remember that you're training the estimation model collectively of the team. So if you're estimating, say, an engineering scope of work,
Mhm.
all the engineers on the team need to synchronize on their estimate.
Hmm.
The second is that this estimate can never be objective. We're terrible at objective estimation of abstract scopes of work. It's humanly impossible. So the moment you start asking people to say how long, tell you how long something will take, you're already into bullshit territory, right? And the larger the batch size of the work, the
Yeah,
worse the bullshit is,
correct.
right? So what we found experimentally is that generally when you start crossing a day or two of effort, your error margins go bonkers,
Hmm.
right? You're typically running like a 50% error margin on small scopes of work, right? But if you say that something is going to get done in a couple of hours and it takes like 3 hours instead, like the sky doesn't fall down,
Yeah,
right? But if you take like a 4 week scope of work and then you say that, oh, there's 100%, 4 weeks, 8 weeks now you're really in trouble,
yeah.
right? So the third point I wanted to make is that people ask for estimates on batch sizes that are unestimatable.
Hmm. At
And
what
the
at what point do you think things enter like complete utter nonsense territory, like bad size
the
one?
the moment you cross like P50 exceeding a week,
Hmm.
I mean, exceeding your, well, generally I would say exceeding your iteration boundary, but the problem is most people's iteration boundaries are 2 to 4 weeks, which is again
Yeah.
like makes no sense to me, right? Like the whole point is you want to reduce your iteration. Like people try to gain control by making the iteration longer,
Hmm.
whereas you gain control by making the iteration smaller, right? So iteration boundary it should not cross, but generally that's a week. If I'm being really aggressive and things are changing very fast, I may drop to daily iteration. But
Hmm.
even in that case, the rule is like if I'm doing daily iterations, scope of work starts in the morning, in production in the evening. It cannot cross the iteration boundary because that's basically breaking your planning cycle, right? Right. So the third point is that if you want estimation to work in even a semi-meaningful way, you've got to cut your batch size down to a couple of days on average.
Right.
Right? Ideally, like less than that, even like 1 day, 1.5 days, that kind. And the fourth point is that this timeline cannot be asked from a human being.
Okay.
Right? What you can do, you treat it as training data. So what you say is, look, you pick a proxy. So people use like Fibonacci numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, small t-shirt sizing, small, whatever, right? The point is you don't ask human beings to think in time. It
Hmm.
creates bias. You say you give them an equivalent of very small, small, medium, large. It doesn't matter. Pick your
Yeah.
labeling, but it conveys that thing. And then what you show people on the team is historical data saying, look, historically the P50, P90 on your small estimates is this much.
This. Hmm.
In practice, this is how much time it is taking, right? So this becomes a training loop that runs every cycle,
Got it.
right? You're recognizing that there is a training data problem. You've got to give the team the training data, and you cannot give an individual the training data because that again introduces massive bias. You want the team to estimate as a group
Yeah.
because that averages things out, and you want them to estimate on small scopes of work. And all of this takes enormous operational discipline.
I have two thoughts. I think the first thought is that, if you don't record, like as a new company, if you're not even recording this data, which means that life may kabhi nahi hoga. Like this, you will never get this
No
right
chance. No
if you
chance.
haven't like taken the trouble to like actually record, because initially you will be wildly off because you're
And you will slowly. No, the worst part about this is there are no tools in the market, not Asana or Jira, that record this stuff by default.
Hmm.
So even if you're saying, okay, I just have tasks, building out a data set of how long did a task actually take historically is
Yeah,
next to impossible unless you've got the thought process going and saying, I'm logging it like this. Out
got
of the
it.
box, no products do it.
And two, uh, there is a trade-off of time, right? Time to actually break down into batch sizes which are meaningful to estimate and
Yeah.
doing the work.
Yeah.
Have you done this enough times to believe now that the time trade-off is worth it? That the amount of
Oh,
time.
100%. I mean, what do you mean it's worth it? You can't execute anything to a timeline otherwise. It's not worth it. There's no alternative.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to, like, there is no other way you
Right?
can actually get estimate.
Because everybody else is busy shaving the time upstream, saying, look, I won't do the batch size stuff. And then without fail, what they're doing is delayed by weeks, months, 100%, 200%, 300% never gets delivered. I mean, would you disagree with me that this is the norm?
Yeah.
Shit
That
doesn't
is
get delivered.
on, at least predictably, never.
Never. Or, I mean,
Uh,
the error margins are hundreds of percent. It's not 50%. It's in
See,
hundreds of percent.
what I have noticed now is that most companies के लिए ना, this timeline doesn't matter as much as they think it does. Right? So all of this is a song and dance that happens because somewhere they've heard that कि ये करना है.
How can without deadline?
How can you even operate?
How can? No deadline. How can? Put a
See,
deadline.
It's like a song and dance that happens. So one of the things that we tried at some point is that we said nahi denge deadline. Because we're like, this is important. Everybody knows this is important. Everybody comes to office every day morning knowing that this important work needs to make progress. So at some point we tried this, saying where there is no deadline, everybody knows this is important, we will make the fastest amount of progress that we can. We will not bother estimation. Which is also, I think, is an okay model to like deal with, where there is no like expectation setting of we will get the estimation right. But trying to say I will get the estimation right without doing the hard work of everything else that is needed to do the estimation right is, I think, where everybody is.
The thing is, again, if you look at it in very simple detail, right? If you come up with a deadline with no basis, you're just like shooting shit.
It's the same as, saying I will hit this OKR without actually knowing kaise, like how are you arriving.
Exactly. Now, second thing is the complexity inherent in product execution is so high that on a 4-week scope of work, you can't say jack shit. Maybe on a week's scope of work, 2 weeks, if you're like a real like killer executor. Beyond that, the error margins compound. It goes into chaos, right? So the only thing you can do as a manager is to say, is it getting faster?
Yeah.
That's it. Right? And if it's getting faster because of operational excellence. It doesn't get faster because you are working harder.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we learned this in factories like 40 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Right? That this is and I mean in networks as well, right? This is there in every networking stack ever. On traffic, on roads. Like you don't go faster by pressing the pedal faster. You go faster by making sure that the overall flow is smooth.
Yeah.
Right? And as a manager in this situation, my focus is on the smoothness of flow.
Yeah.
Once I have smooth flow through the system, then I can ramp things up step by step by either adding talent or, pulling different levers. But if I'm operating in chaos, I have no levers to scale. Now I'm like, boss, as a business, you want me to 10x my numbers next year. Fine. I don't know what my inputs are. Do I need 10x the people? Do I need 3x the engineers? Do I need to break down this team into these two sub teams because these two subsystems needs? I don't have a theory of scaling. Right? If I don't have a theory of scaling, it just boils down to hire more people, make them work longer hours, which is what you will see in the industry as well.
Yes, which is like 99% of all the solutions right now.
What is my scaling strategy? Hire more people, make everyone work longer. But we know, mathematically, forget about historically, which we also know, that does not scale. It literally does not scale. It actually it doesn't just scale sublinearly, it actually pushes you down.
This feels like one of those things where the theoretical knowledge about this exists, but people just don't know it. And hence there's no belief.
No, they don't want to do it because, it's hard. Look, the industry is just...
Hard is still okay if you believe that it gives you the right outcomes. No? People don't believe that this will give you the right outcome.
I am extremely cynical on this. The number of people who fall into that category that you're describing, who, if they believe in it, will do a hard thing, is like 1%.
Like hard hai nahi karna.
The only way it works for the remaining 99% is it's an established process and culture into which they are entering. They're like, okay, sab kar rahe hain, to hum bhi karenge.
It's like you entering ThoughtWorks as a newbie.
Exactly. In any other situation, it's like, boss, no one is doing it. Mera kya incentive hai, nahi karenge.
You're actually right, because every time I've worked in a company where this is already a thing, it just works. Every time I've come into a place where this is not there and somebody is now trying to set this up, highest amount of friction, like impossible almost.
I realized, brought this down to a very simple question over time, right? As a company, do you fire people who are not adhering to the process? Do you consider lack of adherence to the process as a lack of discipline and a sign of underperformance? Does it show up in a perf review? And after enough time and enough support, does the person get let go if they don't manifest that discipline?
Yeah.
On dev, this is done for some things, right? Matlab, if you're not writing tests, say maybe in some companies,
Yeah.
okay, it'll be considered that boss you're underperforming. Actually, that's also very rare, by the way.
That's
right?
also very
Very rare. But like I came from a culture in ThoughtWorks where there was like, okay, build has gone red. There was a way of reacting. There was a certain set of steps the entire team had to follow when the build red. Today, people don't know the build is red because it goes into an email inbox. No one's checking that stuff. So I would actually liken this where we are in the industry to where the Western car manufacturers were in the 70s. Like it's very obvious that the Japanese companies are using a different management philosophy, which is beating them left, right, and center. लेकिन नहीं करना है तो नहीं करना ना अभी. Now, next 2 decades, I have to lose business, lose market share, lose everything before I adopt like Toyota's systems into my businesses.
See, this is why I find it, as a company and as like ambitious founders who all want to do well, it somehow, like, I find it hard to convince myself that if they truly believe that this is a system that would give better outcomes, they wouldn't put the energy behind to sort of implement it. But yeah, like I honestly don't think there's enough said about the theory of software development and how to get it right, what has worked before, etc. But yeah,
look, I do want to qualify that if you're talking about like well-established enterprises with a proven business model on top of which with a clear profit margin, and you're like, okay, where do I get the next 10% or 20% of growth from? That stage, the competitive advantages of this are clear.
Yeah.
Right. But in our line of work, the problem is that what this gives you is output. It doesn't give you outcome. In an established business, the connection between output and outcome is very clear.
Much clearer. Yeah.
Very crisp. In a startup, you can execute like a dawn and completely fail.
Yeah.
Because the correlation between the quality of your output and the size of outcome you generate is very weak. So honestly, I don't care about this stuff early stage.
Correct.
I tell people not to care about this early stage. This doesn't matter. Like all of this matters when your competitive advantage is coming from getting more done with less, faster, better.
But
like,
if you
Uber is entering, Uber is entering Indo. We've got 5 months to launch, 5 weeks to launch a car competing car service from scratch on a system that doesn't support it. Yeah, now you're talking, right? Like you have a system like this, you will deliver.
But you're right. Like I think the correlation between this and outcomes is much more cleaner in a bigger company.
Yeah.
Here, you do all of this and pre-PMF you might just still bomb.
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't do most of it on a small team. Like I'm starting a company now. I wouldn't do most of it right now.
Yeah.
Right. Like to borrow SVS's analogy, early stage, I'm looking to put together a jazz band. Means I'm not here to teach you how to play music. You'd better be an experienced musician. You can just fit in and I don't need to give you a process. I don't need to give you, anything. You can just fit in, and it's like 5-6 people, right? It's family sized. You should be able to jam.
At what point do you think it does matter?
I think it matters the moment you start exceeding. Look, I'll give you a bunch of soft rules because I don't think there's a hard rule. I loosely use like the family, tribe, city spectrum. Family for me is where I know everything about everybody organically. Okay, someone is unhappy, someone is falling sick, whatever, right? Someone's not coming to office, someone's underperforming. I know why, because the group is so small that everyone knows.
Yeah.
Right? Tribe is where the same thing happens, but it's second degree with additional errors. It's now gossip.
Yeah.
Someone is like, oh, at this point, you're probably like 15, 20, 30 people. Someone's like, oh, did you hear, this one's that one, this is happening. That's why, like over there, that person's not coming in properly or they're coming in late these last few days. The point is that the narrative about what your team is going through comes one hop, right? Maybe some people you talk to every day, but there are people who you don't talk to every day. City size is where it flips completely the other way. Everyone's a stranger. Nothing reaches you
Yeah.
firsthand. Everything is multi-hop or, official narrative is coming up, all of that stuff. I think it is somewhere in the tribal stage that you have to start introducing the structure well before you reach city stage.
Yeah.
Once you reach city stage, it's done. You're in that situation which we talked about earlier, right? Like you don't have the systems and processes in place. Every person you hire in now makes it that much harder to introduce that.
Yes. No, I think that's a good way to sort of think about it. So I think like rule of thumb, I think it'll fall in that time when you're going from 10-20 to like before 50, most likely after 10-20.
Look, you'll get this feeling कि यार हाथ से निकल रहा है अभी. मतलब just few months back, we knew everything that was going. Whatever we said we do, we did. Now we've reached a place where whatever we're saying we'll do is not happening, or it's happening slowly, or it's happening unreliably.
Yeah.
You will know as the leader in that situation, you will feel it slipping out of your hand.
Yeah.
That's the time where you have to suddenly hard 90 and go discipline. Like you go from jazz band to like industrial setup, right? Assembly line, system process.
Yeah. You end up losing people then also, because suddenly you're like trying to make hard, right? And some people might
Interestingly, no.
Interestingly,
no. Because the people that I've seen that look at this, that I've ended up working with, they look at all of this as a continuum. Like they're interested in this conversation. For them, it's not a hard right either. It's like, okay, we are scaling. What do we do?
Yeah.
Right? It's a response to the scale. It's not like, oh, ideological, I don't like. It's like, okay, what actually happens? What do we need to do to maintain uptime? What do we need to do? So this is why I like to move the conversation in this direction when I do advisory conversation as well. Where I'm like, yeah, don't talk to me in arbit stuff, right? Like you need execution metrics. Right? There is a point at which my defect rate and will go up, my release rate will go down. When that happens, I will respond with more discipline.
Right.
Whereas people who are not doing that, they'll be like, yeah, it's haath se nikal raha. Like for me, it is not haath se nikal raha. I have numbers.
Correct. This is the other point that I feel that as an ecosystem, we don't put the same rigor to measure execution as much as we put into like, business metrics, etc. Yeah. Which is why all conversations around executions are all hawa and all, at least much worse compared to like business metric. Like a founder would be able to tell you कि अच्छा मेरा retention like 3% कम हो गया, so I'm reacting to that situation by making my acquisition better or something. Yeah. But here it will be like यार पता नहीं क्यों like shipping speed has gone down. It is never
gone down. Yeah. हाँ, कुछ लोग hire कर देते हैं, hire कर लिया अभी, it's still not working, एक तो PM और hire कर लो. Well, you know that death spiral from there, right?
Nice. Cool. I want to move on to the second one. It's kind of related. Sure. I found it very interesting because you said teamwork is not the norm in tech. It's like most teams are a bunch of individuals who are like really trying hard to like stay away from the other person. And you said remote work, if you're in this setup, sort of makes everything worse. Like if you're in this kind of a setup where everybody's trying to avoid the contact with other humans in their company, then remote just makes it even more worse.
Yeah.
First one, like, why do you believe that? Like teamwork is not the norm. Like, why do you believe that? And we'll come to the remote part like after.
So, I mean, you've been in the industry long enough for me to just ask you subjectively, right? What is the comfort level of two people to sit together, collaborate, and own something properly? Own something meaning, matlab, even if it's going to go down, they'll go down on it together. They'll fight for it together. Just two people.
The probability is very low.
Very low, right? Now go across functions.
Yeah.
First question was within a function, right? 2 PMs, 2 designers, 2 engineers, and not senior, junior, not the training cycle. Peers, 2 peers. Very low. Now go cross function. Designer, engineer, PM, engineer. Ever seen that organically happen?
I've always felt this to be an incentive design problem. Like,
I believe so as well. Because I come from a culture where we pair on everything at every level.
Because you're incentivized to do it in clear, understandable, most likely monetary fashion.
No, ironically, in Gojek, we didn't. And Gojek was not a pairing culture.
Acha.
It was a pairing culture in pockets.
Hmm.
Because look, there's a lot of stuff that we did in Gojek that was again organic, and I'm able to articulate it now in hindsight.
Hmm.
And I'm looking back at it and saying, okay, if I had to do it again, I would do it like this. This incentive structure was not built into Gojek,
Hmm.
right? Because look, think about the implications of it, right? Like the first thing you're saying is like, any task. So this is how we do it on code, and I've used it effectively across like the life cycle, right? Any artifact that is being created that requires review will be reviewed continuously. So you will notice this as a recurring theme. Most companies do everything batch mode.
Yeah.
Perf review, batch mode. Code review, batch mode. Right? Everything is in batch mode.
Yeah.
And if you think about how systems scale, one of the simple things that happen when you scale a system is you switch from batch mode to stream mode.
Hmm.
Right? And then you take windows and snapshots. I mean, this is literally how you scale stuff, right? Now, over here, what is happening is any artifact that requires review is in stream mode.
Hmm.
We want the review to happen as close to the time of the creation of the artifact as possible, ideally at the same time. Now, the naive version of this is like, yeah, now you're putting two people to do one person's job.
Hmm.
Right? But if you actually instrument it and look at the numbers, because the review is happening so close and the context is so high, you win that many times over in lower error rates. What gets done downstream of that tends to be much more reliably done. But second, and I think this subtlety is extremely poorly understood. When you work in a team, you zone in together. When you're out playing football with your team, it's not like, bro, I'm in state of flow. Tum matlab jo karna hai, tum kar lo, right? Like, what does it mean to be a team? You're in a state of flow together.
Yeah.
Where do you see groups of people in a state of flow together? And I spent my entire career working in pairs where, boss, we sustain like 6-8 hours of flow every day. And you can't do that alone. Like, I know, yes, there are some legendary people who do it solo. But if I'm working alone, if I can manage 2 hours of flow every day, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm a lazy guy. But even a lazy guy like me, while pairing, I'm doing like 4 hours, absolute rock bottom minimum of flow every day. Maybe 6, maybe 8. Do you know what is the impact on productivity of people who are in state of flow like 4 to 6 hours a day? They casually outperform. Casually. So you are sitting here doing the naive math of saying, yeah, two people are doing one person's work. I'm like, boss, these two people are now in a state of flow 4 to 6 hours every day. Output in state of flow is many-fold, both in quality and quantity. We know this as makers.
Again, I believe all of this is belief nahi hai. Like what you
Of course. Yeah,
there is
look, this is slightly ranty on my side, right? But the problem is that you've got to think about how you feel while doing the work, no? Like what feels good while doing the work? Like I crave state of flow. There's nobody I know who's a maker who does not crave state of flow. Nobody, zero people. No one is like, oh, my company is like forcing me into a state of flow 8 hours a day, violation of employee rights. But you try to have a wider conversation with people about state of flow as a critical aspect of execution, and you can't have that conversation. The experiential aspect of execution is just ignored. It's like literally, it's amazing because you will have this conversation in depth for your customers, for your product. They're like, how do they feel when they click this button? Yeah, but that is somehow weirdly like siloed and sandboxed into that conversation, but nowhere else. Like, how do your employees feel when they file a reimbursement? How does the developer feel when they pick up a story?
I think
right? How does a PM feel when a release is happening?
I think I remember reading you only where you said, the moment you create a product and a team, you've created like two things and not one thing. People tend to forget that there is a people experience and then there is a, the customer facing experience that this people are building. And if their experience goes for a toss, the immediate output is that the customer sort of starts.
I mean, again, right? Like what you just described in those sentences is product thinking. Except that for some reason, we think product thinking only applies to
That's
one
right.
interface
Yeah.
with one set of stakeholders in the system of value creation.
Hmm.
Whereas all the other stakeholders who are creating that value for the final stakeholder, their efficiency and their engagement, their retention, their churn does not matter.
And there's
Matlab, this
actually
is a HR problem.
one of my wild thoughts is to one day put people who've done product thinking in people roles always.
No, what
Because
is why wild thought? That's what we did.
kind of, yes, that's kind of what you guys did
Head
as
of
well.
head of HR of Gojek Tech for a couple of years.
Yeah, because I'm
Half
like,
my people team was full of engineers and contras.
yes, because I'm like, either you teach, because it's not part of their training, like either you sit and teach, which is also possible, but most people don't have the time to do that, or you find somebody who thinks like this and make them do this role instead of that role.
Yeah.
And most people don't realize that they'll probably have an outsized impact on even the product by doing this role compared to them actually building product.
Like I was telling my co-founder this, I'm like, look, we are not ever hiring a head of HR. I am the head of HR.
Yeah, correct. I believe
right.
this.
I'm okay hiring a VP of HR to report to me if we end up being lucky enough to scale. But I'm the CHRO. The CEO is the CHRO because in a product company where everything is made by people, HR policy is your single biggest lever.
Yeah, I agree. It's the most underrated, underfunded. Like just like the amount of smart people that companies throw at the customer side, and compare that to the amount of smart people that they throw at the people side. It's just a lopsided sort of equation in most companies.
And I mean, it's like that's the fulcrum, right? You're like, boss, I'm going to ignore the fulcrum. Just pretend it's not a fulcrum.
But just going back to what you had said, right? Do you believe that everybody likes to be a solo player, like by default, and it's only when they work together, see that their state of flow is going up, and then they sort of convert?
Because the getting into that is so painful, no? Like, I don't know if you would remember the first time you joined a team, like in the schoolyard, like none of us do.
Yeah.
But even in the work context, the first time you started working, and like nobody I know had a good time. It's very difficult, right? Because you have to learn an entirely new set of skills of, when do you push your way forward? How do you push your way forward? When do you take a step back? When do you let someone else take the lead? How do you, like in our bootcamp, we used to bake this into the cross-cutting fabric of the training, that you are going to now learn to argue with each other positively, healthily. We're going to give you like a framework at a sort of a in your bones level framework over the course of 8 weeks, because you are now going to argue each other every day. Right? We're going to work on code. We're going to take design choices. I'm not going to say anything. You guys decide what the design choice is, then you debate it out. I want to see factions form. I want you to get used to forming and dissolving factions. Right? I want you to get used to switching sides, where you're like, I really believe this, but this argument is convincing, so I'm switching sides now. That switching sides is itself seems like such a simple thing. But in tech companies, no one switches sides. It's just like, no, this is my belief, this is my belief.
We used to do this fun thing in the group that I was part of in Pilani, where in the recruitment process, we would get two people, give them some extremely controversial topic. They would go all out guns blazing on one side, and middle of the way we would pause and say, now switch.
Now switch.
And that was such a disarming way to like find people who can immediately sort of empathize with
argue the other side. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
But
I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, I do it. It's quite fun to see people, especially if they're not being told that this is going to happen. It's quite fun.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's almost logical to see why, if you're not already have the processes to do this, if you go remote, then you're completely fucked.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, your best case outcome if you run a really disciplined team is open source velocity, which is very low.
Yeah.
Right? Now you layer on non-engineers who are going to fight the process, because open source processes are enormously demanding.
Yeah.
Right? Anyone that's tried to get a PR merged into an proper open source project knows like the level of checks that go into that. And open source again has the problem of fundamentally it's designed to keep everyone except core IC. Right? Everyone that is a wider contributor is fundamentally an individual contributor. They are not a member of a team. They
Right.
take a piece of work and they go alone. These two dynamics are problematic to overcome. I mean, I'm going to have to deal with it now in the next company, but honestly, I don't really have a very well fleshed out thought process on how I'm going to attack that because I don't want to be slow. And I mean, I'm just going to like happily debate anybody who says that they're fully distributed and faster. I'm sorry.
I think you know what is happening. They are comparing a dysfunctional in-person org
In-person team. Correct.
to a remote org which
Well-run
is
remote org.
very functional. Like you're fucking
Yeah.
comparing Mozilla to like some
Yeah.
random startup in
Yeah.
Bangalore, and then saying,
Makes
"Oh,
no sense.
look, they are remote. They are so much faster." I'm like,
Faster.
no, they are
Yeah.
slow. You
Yeah.
would be slower if you did
Yes.
remote.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
But I think that's what's happening. It's not an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
Like, without like even simple things like documentation culture. Like if you don't have it and if you pull the plug and go for it, then utter chaos will reign.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, this is part of our thesis, right? Like, I think that remote is here to stay for other reasons.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the tool chain and the product development life cycle, it is not designed to allow remote collaboration. It's all you build an artifact and move it to the next stage, and then someone else picks it up. Like the farthest we've gotten is like shared live edit on Google Docs.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you try to do
That
Confluence,
also,
it's a pain.
That's also it's a pain only.
That's also a pain, right? So like maybe like what do you call silent meetings is the state of the art, which is honestly very primitive if you think about it in the bigger scheme of things. Like think about what it would mean for a designer and engineer to collaborate remotely on a process. You're talking about something that's baked into the IDE. You're talking about a hybrid, IntelliJ Figma or a VS Code Figma, which allows them to seamlessly collaborate even though they are remote. Even there, like the closest we've got is Tuple.
Yeah.
Right, which is literally like screen sharing. Okay, nice. But I mean, we should be able to do better than this, right?
Yeah. I don't think there is any tool today that has crossed the bar of this is better than being sitting next to this person.
Correct.
Like your laptop is open, my laptop is open, we're sitting next to each other. You can't beat
You can't beat that. But having said that, the point I want to make is I don't think that's a great product to build because people do not want to sit next to each other with their laptops.
Correct.
Right? There's a human nature problem there to overcome. Your TAM on a product which attacks people who are like, oh, I really like to sit next to someone and collaborate with an open laptop. Now I need a product that makes this better for me is a really small TAM.
Yeah. No, I agree that remote is what people would, some form of remote may not sort of be like, oh, you never see this. Do you not believe in the whole, like the emotional connect of, like you said, being part of a team and how that sort of contributes to everything?
No, I really do, but I think it matters for velocity because I've done years of open source. No phone call, no video call, definitely. This is like late 2000s, early 2010s. No video call. It's just email and IRC. And I was perfectly happy. But was there velocity? No.
I think, there was velocity, but I think, like I said, I think it's being compared to the wrong.
It's being compared, yeah.
Got it. Cool. Very interesting. I think there's a lot of things I can immediately do with that. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about was my favorite sort of tweet in that thread.
Yeah. Let me see your notes.
I'll tell you, it's called You're Not Steve Jobs. Which I think is sort of related to the other couple of things that you said, that the most broken thing in our industry is requirements, right?
Yeah.
And another place is that, I think largely around, I think these are somewhat related, like the skill of being able to deliver quality requirements, I think is extremely underappreciated. Which is sort of, I think is connected
underappreciated is a very polite statement, right? Like the problem is that people who should be owning that look down on it. The same as project management.
Yeah.
It's like requirements and project management are at the core of smooth, fast, stable delivery.
Yeah.
And both skills are looked down as menial work, which is beneath our dignity. Right? You pick the designation. It doesn't matter whether it's PM or EM or whatever, right? Everyone's like, no, I'm too big for this. And then every junior who's put on it is like aspiring to get away from it as fast as possible without realizing that mastering this is at the core of your craft.
Yeah. No, I remember this specifically. I think it hit me when Anirban, who was my manager at Hike, when we were doing it was some massive project. Like, he's like, "Iska requirement मैं लिखेगा." And I'm like, "तू क्यों लिख रहा है? Like, why is this like the most important thing that you could be doing?" And I think that's the first time he said that this is top of the funnel. Like, if I fuck this up,
Baki sub waste.
Everything below the funnel is like screwed.
Yeah.
So I think that's when I sort of realized that, like it's an extremely high leverage activity.
Yeah.
And if you're not trained to, like, even in requirement, there are levels, like you could be writing a requirement for like a small text change versus like launching a new product. You can't just throw an APM at it saying, "Oh, we have discussed like kya karna hai, likho jaake, like go finish and write this PID for this massive product that we're about to launch." But I assumed it was related to You're Not Steve Jobs, but what do you actually mean when you said that?
So You're Not Steve Jobs is just like every time some conversation happens, it's like the Nazis, the Nazis wala dead end in online conversation. Like they have that joke that eventually every online debate descends to a point where someone compares them to Nazis, right? I'm like, every entrepreneurial thing somewhere comes, but Steve Jobs did it, right? And I'm like, look, let's just nip that in the bud. You're not Steve Jobs, right? Like, it worked for Steve Jobs. It's not going to work for you. It's not going to work for me.
I don't believe it works for him also. I think it's one of these myths that nobody has sort of questioned. And maybe if there is, people who actually worked with him to launch products, same shit would have happened. Like some passing conversation would have happened saying ye kar dete, but somebody actually did the hard work of converting that into a.
Even let's grant the mythology, right? Let's grant prima facie, just grant the mythology that he was a superhero. He did all this stuff. Fine. Why do you think you're a superhero? How is this an argument for anything? Yeah, okay, Apple did it like that, Steve Jobs, so I'm also doing that. But you're not Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
You're not Elon Musk, you are not Bill Gates, you are none of those people. Just take a chill pill.
There are two parts to requirements, right? One is should we do this? Like that coherent argument as to why this is the right thing to be done at this point, etc. Then there is the other part, which is, okay, now I'll convert this into like chunkable things that we can actually ship predictably, etc. The first part pe to like full, like there are only three logical ways in my head, where you can arrive at why should we do this now, which again involves hard work. You pick up the phone, talk. Go in person, meet your customer. That is one way to get it. You sit on your database and query to find
do analysis.
Or you sit with people who are monitoring competitors, look at market research. These are the only three legitimate ways in which I have.
Three broad strokes. Absolutely.
If you're proposing something, it better be based on one of these three things, ideally a combination of all three. But no, like it's never like, again, I feel that it's more like you said, this is what I took out when you said, you're not Steve Jobs, because I think people believe this is what I've noticed happens. Like when you're early stage, when you're the founder, right? You unknowingly are doing the work that I just described.
Of course.
Right? You're talking to customers, you're looking at data.
It is happening.
It is happening, but you haven't registered in your head that
this kind of work is happening.
What you have registered is कि मैं punt लेता था. I used to like come out with ideas and they would work. And then like extrapolate 4 years later when you're running like a 200-person org, you hardly spend time doing anything else apart from raising money and managing your board, which is what you should be doing. But you still believe that I will still have the same hit rate that I did when I was doing this activity like 4 years ago.
Also, 4 years ago, you could have just gotten a lucky streak.
Exactly. Like that could also be it, but
which is more probable, by the way.
at least probability wise, you were like, if you had to pick somebody in your org when you were like 5 people, the person who is doing this is the most likely person who would get it right, and that person just so happened to be you. It is not some internal genius streak that like you had, which was resulting in good hits. You were doing the hard work without registering it as work.
As hard work.
Now, 4 years later, you completely forget that you're no longer doing the hard work that results in high profit.
Also, you forget that over those 4 years, what you were supposed to do was to take what you were doing and convert it into a system.
Correct.
Which several people who are specialists can now operate within to replicate what you were doing single-handed.
Yes.
Because that's called scaling up.
Yeah. But I've always seen this, that the hit rate starts going down and people are wondering, why am I no longer Steve Jobs?
I know.
I'm like, because you stopped doing what you were doing before. But yeah, I don't know. Like sometimes I always feel like in B2B companies, right? It's easier to sort of still get a sense of like what is right. Again, it's not because of anything else, but as a B2B founder, you're probably more in touch with who your customers are. And you're even the customer, who knows? That's like the easiest way to do it. If you want to have a high hit rate on such things, if you are the customer, then it's great. You continue to have
Absolutely.
That. Or if you're in a regulated market where probably like the founder is like getting signals about like what is happening, etc., more than the person who's executing on the floor. But consumer companies made it deadly to like sort of walk in like without any sort of work and say ki, I have a feeling ki ye chalega, ye karo. Which again sort of goes back to like, people not putting the premium on coming up with requirements. This is step one.
I actually think it's very interesting that there is no conversation about what requirements are. Intuitively, we all like, requirements. What do we mean? I mean, and I'm not saying there's one right answer. I'm just saying like, here is something we all use the word. This is my smell now. Okay, there's a word we all use in the industry. Everyone uses it. You'll see it in interviews. You'll see it on the floor. You'll see it everywhere. But nobody can write a one-pager for the term. Right? Product manager, requirement.
What do you call, like if you had to describe it in like 2 sentences? What to you is a requirement? What is the job? What is the job to be done?
I actually take a step back and say it doesn't exist in isolation. What we're working with is a pipeline. At one end of the pipeline, you have something defined using an ambiguous grammar. At the other end of the pipeline, you have something defined in an unambiguous grammar. Because at this point, it has to run on a computer. At this point, you need absolute clarity. कि क्या होना है अभी?
And Q.
हाँ, मतलब Q is economic, right? मतलब if you make a mistake over there, it will run on the computer and you will not get an economic result.
Correct. Yes, you're right.
Right? So that is part of the quality control on the system. But the point is, by the time you reach here, the requirement, see, you're giving the computer also requirements only, no?
Yeah.
It's just that what is changing is the grammar you use to define those requirements.
No, I think that's
right. It's a ambiguous. So a second interesting lens came up today when I was meeting a friend, Pradeep. It's basically the word cell to shape rotator continuum, right? Like you start word cell and you end shape rotator. But if the requirements can't go from here to here, then you're going to have a mess.
Yeah, I think that's a great bar. Like just have a in your head if you're thinking about, can I, like if I had the time, would I be able to like run this on a computer, like without me being
or
there?
If you, even if you don't, right, the way you then say is, if this is a continuum, let me take a step further in from there and say, what is the artifact life cycle in my company, right? And as that artifact life cycle progresses towards a commit, a code commit, is the level of clarity increasing and increasing to a point where when it is time to write the code, the person writing the code is not making random assumptions because the clarity is missing. See, because the problem is the person who writes the code has to be unambiguous.
Yeah.
If you look at most companies, what happens is maximum ambiguity resolution is made by the engineer. who's
That
not
is,
qualified to do it, right? So they'll make some random assumptions with dhande ka fatta hai usko. I'm like, boss, why are you asking the person whose skill set is different to resolve business ambiguities for you?
this is also one of the prime reasons why a remote can't happen in most companies, because that ambiguity resolution is happening at the table.
At the table, exactly. So ThoughtWorks, this used to be the thing we were trained to do. We do this in bootcamp also. When you are making an assumption, before you commit to the assumption, ask the domain expert. If you can't ask the domain expert in a timely manner, either because they're not available or they're in the US or whatever, document the assumption and validate it at the next earliest opportune moment. Because when you're talking about domain, business rules, all of that stuff, those assumptions are dangerous.
Yeah.
So for me, the quality control in a user story is given the user story and background documentation, right? Which are linked in a sort of a index to read there, saying this is the PRD. These are like more general documents, customer interview, whatever, right? There's a set of reading. The engineer can make mostly the right assumptions. That is quality control at a user story level for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's
right. And you attack this backwards also, right? Like you make sure that engineers are exposed to Dhanda.
Yeah.
Consistently.
So even if they had to make assumptions, they make
better quality assumptions. Yeah.
Yeah. No, makes sense. I think one of the, when people ask me like, why should engineering be like exposed to this? People forget that ye ho raha hai, that they're sitting and making real-time assumptions on what needs to happen. And if they don't have context of why are we doing this, then too, they will make 3 assumptions that will.
Yeah. When I get this question, I'm just like, look, if you are hiring a civil engineer to build a dam and that civil engineer asked you this question, would you hire that civil engineer? No. You know what? Why should I care about which valley my dam is being built in? Why should I care about who lives over there?
Or
why should I care? What will, is there a road on this side, that side? How will I get concrete and cement over? No. I don't care. You just give me the requirements and I'll build the dam. It was, are you an engineer or are you?
That makes it very real. I think I will use this. That makes it very real.
Any sane civil engineer is going to go there, see the land, survey it, see who has to be moved, who has to be resettled, what is the supply chain for materials. All these factors are within the scope of the engineer. No? What, you're going to go hire a product manager for that also, is it?
That's what most likely will happen in the current system. It's actually a nice segue into, I've a bunch of conversations, not directly something that you've quoted or anything, but the whole thought around the seat at the table, right? Like as to how who should be at the seat at the table, and what is the qualification for you to be at the seat of the table? Because from whatever I have seen, right, I am like, there needs to be a finite number of people. Because the table can't be like 50 log.
It can't be chaos, right? Again.
Which means that you're qualifying somebody to go sit there.
Yeah.
And most people who say, at least from whatever I have seen, like, I want a seat at the table. Number one, they don't. Inherently, when you try to dig deep on, do they really want to like be at this table? Do they sort of...
Can they deal?
Can they deal with this table or not? Like, you will realize that no, they just want to like be at the table because it looks cool to be at the table. Second is when you tell them the amount of work it needs to be successful at the table.
Yeah.
Again, you lose like 90% of the janta. Achha, ye sab karna padta hai. Like, then it goes away.
Yeah.
But how have you sort of thought about this concept at all? Like, what do they need to do? How do you succeed, etc.?
So I basically think of it in terms of 3 key roles: resource acquisition, resource allocation, and resource utilization. Now, resources generally intangibles as well, right? It can be money, it can be talent, it can be brand, whatever. Yeah. Now, inevitably, the resource allocator is at the table. Because that's the primary thing that happens at the table.
Yeah.
Right? Resource acquirer may or may not be at the table. Resource utilizer may or may not be at the table.
Yeah.
But the allocator is always there. For me, the question is, in any given situation, how much feedback do you need from the ground? which determines how much empowerment of the resource utilizer is needed. Right? Again, it also depends on the nature of resources being acquired and the complexity there. Because do you need the resource acquirer also at the table? To give line of sight, saying, boss, if we do this, then it creates a flywheel so we can acquire more of, like, ye karenge to matlab brand banega. So we know that, do you need to have that person? And fundamentally, purely personally, right? In my company, all three parties need to be able to express themselves in writing.
That's like a min bar.
Because otherwise, what happens is the most common failure mode is your word cell shape rotator conflict, right? And the only way to break that is to just go into writing. Because otherwise, what happens is you have people showing up that you're like, no, I have a dream. Give me Aladdin ka chirag. I want to come here and rub this lamp 3 times. I've got resources. I've given you resources. 1, 2, 3. Grant my wish. ऐसे थोड़ी होता है ना. So that part of it gets very nicely addressed if you say, okay, if you're at this table, the cadences that this table runs are all silent methods. No word selling.
Hardly happens.
Of course, because the people who acquire resources are mostly word cells. Why would they set up a system like this? The only people who are going to sign up for something like this are word cell shape rotator hybrids.
Yeah.
Hedge foxes.
That's true though. Now, what else? Like, what else do you like put as a criteria to like?
That's it. I don't care about it. And I mean, to be fair, if you're in the allocation and utilization role, one or the other, or if those roles are combined, you must have a deep background in one or the other maker disciplines. You must.
Why though? Just to complete that thought.
Because the utilization of those resources requires an understanding of the nitty-gritty. It's like saying that, boss, matlab, I have never run a logistics supply chain in a wartime zone. Then how do I know what kind of resource leakage I will have? How many parallel supply chain? I mean, you need wartime experience to give the right feedback, right?
Like, can I deliver what you want with the resources that you've allocated?
That you've allocated? How long will it take? What are the trade-offs? What is possible? What is not? You can't have that conversation if you have a word cell sitting. An inexperienced word cell. I mean, I have no problem with experienced word cells.
See, it's very interesting. So what I've noticed is like companies like Amazon, you have different kinds of makers, right? You have designers, PMs to some degree, engineers, etc. Amazon seems to have a culture of, at some point, any of these people can sort of go sit at the table. Because they all seem to be getting trained on like these core skill sets that you need to sit. So I've seen a lot of like, sometimes, it's the engineering manager who becomes a GM. Sometimes it's the design lead who becomes the GM. But in most companies that I've seen in India, it is the product function that generates like all the people who sit at the table are coming out of this function. Have you seen this as well? And B,
of course.
Why do you think
these product managers don't say no? See, the whole point of fiction over here is the acquirer and allocator does not want to hear a no. They want to rub the lamp, make a wish, make it happen. Now, in the real world, the easy way to work this is to say yes and then not deliver. Or to deliver something else, or to deliver a subset. Now, is that not true of most of the delivery you've seen? Just say yes and then deliver something else, deliver a subset. Tell a story about why what we said we do can't happen, or something else needs to happen. This is how it always works out. Whereas if you...
But this can happen with anybody, no? Like, why does it need to be a...
No, because an engineer or a designer will sit at the table and say no, right there.
कि ये तो हो ही नहीं सकता.
नहीं हो सकता.
But isn't that a skill that you need to pick up to be able to go and like sit at the table then?
Absolutely. Bilkul. The point is it cuts two ways. No? If you have enough power to control the other roles at the table, you want to make sure that the acquirer and allocator sitting at the table is okay hearing a no.
Yeah.
Right? Is willing to go into the details and cross-question.
Correct.
Right? Have you read that essay by this guy, Fakrik Software? What was his name? Damn, how could I forget? I mean, he has a very, very nice set of essays, and one of them is an essay talking about his interaction with Bill Gates when he was the product manager on Excel. in like 91 or
Oh.
92 or something. And in those days, you should see the thing. He's given Bill Gates a 200-page document or something, 48 hours before, some ridiculous time. And he goes into that meeting and Bill Gates has read and annotated every page. ये होता है allocator ना. Can the allocator take someone's class? Properly take someone's class?
If
the answer is no, then you end up having
to at the table then.
You should be, yeah. But the problem is that most allocators cannot, they can be bullshitted, right? Left, right, and center. And they don't want to hear a no. They don't want to hear about actual constraints. They just want to be like, look, just make it happen. I don't care how. मेरे को नहीं घुसना है सब में. So basically, then what happens is a role starts to get created of a person who comes and says yes.
Yeah.
And then kicks the friction downstream. Anyway, that is going to surface. But they're like, yeah, when it happens, we'll see. Whereas a designer or engineer upfront is going to be like, look, I can see 10 steps ahead. This will be a problem. That will be a problem. Done. Conversation dies right there.
Yeah. I think this is also interesting how this connects to why you can't, as you move up the chain, right? You can't let go of the maker instincts that made you good to begin with.
Of course.
Because you can't have a meaningful conversation at the table if you've completely forgotten what it is to sort of do
unless your counterpart is of a similar nature.
Exactly. Yeah. But
because then you're just like, bro. Oh, yeah. Done, bro. That's the conversation, right?
I don't know. Sometimes I really wonder how we are getting away with, all of this. And
because the extremely bitter takeaway I have is in our sector, none of this matters. It only matters at scale. Because product market fit, none of this matters.
Pre-product
PMF. And for me, when I say PMF, I'm actually extrapolating that to the point where you have like a proven enterprise that is running, which has these margins, which will deliver these numbers with this. That clarity takes a long time to emerge. But I don't just literally mean initial traction, right? I mean कि यार असली धंधा है अभी.
No, but it need not be this rigorous, but some level of this needs to start happening like at all stages, right? It can't be like.
No, my point is without this also you can be successful.
Yes, but
my point being that, and in fact, if you look at most cases, because of the nature of the game, most people who are successful without this. So when they actually need it, because they've become successful enough to need it, it's not there.
Like, for example, if somebody is like a young sort of seniorish maker, what would you say they should start doing to be an effective person at the table, like a few years down the line?
See, one is you have to learn to negotiate. The second is you have to understand that there is a tendency to see when you touch physical reality as a maker, it's unambiguous. That thing gets made or it doesn't. I mean, it's especially true for programmers because you have a computer sitting there, saying boss syntax error. But any maker, it doesn't matter. You fundamentally touch physical materials in some way. You know there are constraints. You have to learn how to hide that from everyone else. Right? Because look, we tend to forget this as makers, that there are people out there who spent their entire careers doing law, finance, whatever, who have never had to unambiguously resolve anything ever in their lives. Ever.
Yeah.
Not once. Not upfront. I mean, yes, reality may resolve it unambiguously. Oh, we made an investment, it worked out, it didn't work out 5 years now. But it doesn't happen right then. That instant feedback that I'm trying to do this, it is not possible, physically not possible, or computationally not possible. That experience is not there for the majority of people in the industry. It's just not. It's a tale of two cities kind of a thing, right? Like there's one set of people who can think in an unambiguous grammar, and there's one set of people who can only think in an ambiguous grammar. And you are the person who's bridging the two groups.
Yeah. That's
so you don't so you show up and just say no. The problem is the mindset tends to be that why can't these people see the truth? point is like, boss, cognitive ability to see something is not there. You see it as the truth. They cannot reason about it because the tool chain is not there. That's
Accepting that
unfair.
reality has been the biggest unlock in my career.
Huh, I think it's going to be true for anybody, right? Like there's a certain point at which you realize that, navigating ambiguity while leaving it ambiguous, not resolving it to clarity. Navigating ambiguity while leaving it ambiguous is a key skill.
Yeah, because your instinct is to say, ki, let me like show you why this is like a
Correct.
terrible idea or why it can't be done, etc.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I mean,
but
if this is apropos of our previous point, this is also situational. Like you do this stuff with someone who's a maker origin leader, they're going to be like, dude, stop faffing me, get out.
yeah,
Because वो तो class लेंगे ना फिर.
correct. If you're fapping, yes.
हाँ.
Or if
No, I mean,
you're actually doing.
The thing is, you are faffing, right? Because you're literally going in there and taking something which can't be done and saying, yes, this is the game.
No, I meant the other way around, that if you are a maker who is sort of talking to another previous maker,
Yeah.
then when you go into this detail of the same Bill Gates example that you said, right, where that is the person you can hand a 200-page document and say कि इसलिए नहीं हो सकता, and they will appreciate,
and they will fight you on it.
Correct.
And they will fight you on it, but they will fight you on it on that, not
on that.
नहीं, why don't you try harder? दूसरा segment ढूंढना है क्या? मतलब you don't have those conversations.
But do you think like over time you will start having more people? So this is my belief that the first decade of the Indian startup ecosystem, which is what we've, I think, concluded at this point, was largely started by people who had courage, a lot of privilege also to some extent. You needed both to be able to do this in the last decade. And you just jumped into it and started executing and things happened, right? But I feel that now you have enough people in the ecosystem who've somewhat, we imported a lot of people from the valley in the last decade who came and sort of, if you got lucky, you got to learn from these people, saying, "Acha, there is some method to this madness." Yeah. I feel like those people will now start, hopefully, starting companies in the next 10 years, and it'll become. You will get a lot less 1-0 outcomes. Like if you look at the Indian startup ecosystem, you see a lot of 1-0 outcomes. And the reason for that is it was designed to be like 1-0. Like it was most likely courage, privilege, right place at the right time, chal gaya.
Yeah.
Because internally, like everybody that like I see who's actually working in these companies, when you see how like they're deciding what to do next, or like deciding what what needs to be cut, what needs to be like sort of invested in. There is no method. It is continuing to be madness. And it's sort of now coming to that big conclusion, right? Like you can see now that it's you can't
suboptimal.
It's not possible to like continue like this forever. You can do it in a great bull market, but all starts coming to a foray when you like enter a bear market.
Absolutely.
My hope is that next decade will have people who have sort of learned actually how to do this. So you will have more methodical sort of approaches to like product building, company building, etc.
My hope actually the next decade is all the people who know how to do this will just outsource it to me.
But this is my hope that finally we have like operators who actually know, who can be those Bill Gates in a room where they will sit and read through your plan and actually comment on it logically, because unko pata hai. They've done this shit. It's not arbitrary. It is logical. It's theoretical. It's like how any other engineering is, right?
There's a mental model behind it.
Like imagine, again, going back to your dam example, right? Imagine like this conversation where it's a dam being built and there's a conversation happening saying, "Kyun kar do 2 din mein?" Like you can't not get into the specifics of why is this not possible to be done, like what materials are you using, etc. But somehow we have managed in the last 10 years to like not do all of that and still somehow land in a decent enough place, I would say, at this point. But that's pretty much. I think we're also out of time.
Yep.
It was a very fun chat, yeah, Siddhu. This
Yeah,
is super
likewise.
useful. Lots of things, hopefully, that people who end up listening to can sort of reflect on. Especially, like, I think a large part of the conversation was around how to sort of execute well,
Yeah.
how to do good software development, how to build good products, which I think will be useful. Anything else that you want to sort of leave people with?
No, nothing in particular. I just think that you know, it doesn't make sense to always just be doing something because that's how it's been done, and that's how you see it done, and you don't. I think it's very important to take a step back, no matter what you're doing, and to build some theory behind it, right? Because you tend to see this polarization where you at different points in time, either there's only theory and no praxis, or there's only praxis and no theory. I think like we've reached a place where it's like, we do Scrum, we do this, we do that. It's all praxis. There's no theory. Like we're not sitting and thinking what is good for us in our ecosystem, in our market, given the kind of people we are, the cultures we come from. How do we run this?
Got it. Are you hiring? Is this a good place to plug?
Yes. No, I am hiring, but very, very limited. Got like 2 more open positions to fill.
I'll plug Sidhu's Twitter in the description. You guys can reach out to him if you are looking to join Sidhu's company. Cool. Thanks a lot, yeah, Sidhu. This was
Thanks
fun.
so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.